The PSVR2 is finally here, and in my humble opinion, as Eurogamer's resident VR aficionado, it is brilliant. I've honestly been having so much fun with it that I've almost forgotten what real life looks like now, but one of the things I've been loving the most on the rare occasion when I do remove the headset is reading all the comments from first-time VR users who are having their minds blown by just how good VR is. It's a wonderful sight to see, and it can only be a good thing that PSVR2 is allowing many more people to enjoy the tech without having to also own a big PC gaming rig. Nevertheless, I have seen a few people who haven't taken to it as well as me, and a bunch of people who really want to try it after seeing all the positive feedback, but are a bit worried by some of the criticisms. Well, that's where I, Eurogamer's Ian Higton, come in, with this video that contains 9 ways to get the most out of your PlayStation VR 2. This video is for both new owners and potential buyers alike, and it should help you enjoy the world of VR to its fullest. So, let's do this thing. I've seen a fair amount of new PSVR2 adopters in the comments sections of my videos talking about the headset not feeling particularly comfy for them, specifically when it comes to intense pressure on the nose and sinus area. Basically, if this sounds like something you're experiencing, there's a high chance that you're simply wearing the headset wrong. Despite the fact that the headset looks like a crown, wearing it like one by having the headset's halo strap sitting horizontally on your skull will not only affect your comfort levels, but also your visual quality too. But more on that in the second point. What you need to do is aim to have the back of the halo strap, the part with the dial on it, sitting as close to your neck as possible, while the cushioned area at the front rests on your forehead. Once you've got it feeling right, tighten the dial on the back strap, and this position will then support the full weight of the headset, effectively removing all but the slightest pressure around your nose. One other thing I noticed when playing around with the IPD wheel is that pushing the lenses close together does have a pinching effect on the bridge of my own nose, even when the headset is sitting correctly. So it might be worth double checking that your IPD is correct by double tapping the PS button on your preferred Sense controller to bring up your PSVR2 quick menu. Then select Adjust Visibility and make sure that both of your eyes are in the blue circles shown on the screen. Complaints about blurry visuals on the PSVR2 are so common at the moment that it's becoming a bit of a meme. But to be fair, if this is your first time with a VR headset and you're struggling to find the sweet spots where the graphics look nice and sharp, this section should help you out. First up, make sure you're wearing the headset in the right position, as explained in my first point, and then make sure you've pushed the visor in as far as it will go. The majority of the blur that first-time users are experiencing really is down to incorrect positioning, and you'll be surprised by how much difference a millimetre or two makes. Another thing you should do is double-check your IPD, again, just as I explained in my first point. The IPD dial on the top of the PSVR2's visor is a very easy and convenient way to change the IPD and get things into focus for you, but it's also in a position that is easy to knock when you're picking up or putting down the headset. That means even though you have to set your IPD when you do the initial setup, it's always worth popping back to that menu to double check every so often, especially if you're a big clumsy idiot like me who keeps accidentally moving that dial. Another good way to fine-tune your focus is to look at some in-game text, preferably white text on a dark background, and then check for chromatic aberration, which is a fancy name for the way colours from bright objects leak into the rest of the image. If you are getting this, try doing some micro adjustments of your IPD wheel and headset positioning to minimise that effect. There's always going to be a bit of chromatic aberration in the headset due to the lenses, but the more you can minimise it, the sharper the resulting image will look to you. Other things you can try are cleaning your lenses with a microfiber cloth, no liquids, you'll break it, especially if you've been playing a bit too much pistol whip and you've gotten a sweat on in there, and reducing the screen brightness by bringing up the PSVR2's quick menu and adjusting the slider. This will not only reduce a bit of the light bloom, but it will also reduce the strain on your eyes when you're playing games that feature a lot of really bright areas. You'd be forgiven for thinking the word Mura was invented just for the PSVR2, as, honest to God, I've read that word more times since the PSVR2 came out than any time before that, despite the fact that Mura is something that affects pretty much every VR headset to some degree, but it does affect the PSVR2 more so because of its OLED lenses. So maybe you've heard people complaining about Mura and that's putting you off buying a PSVR2. Maybe you're new to VR and you're experiencing it for yourself for the first time, or maybe you just don't know what the WTF Mura even is. Well, I'm here to help. Kinda. In the simplest terms, the Mura effect looks like a fine grainy mesh that covers the entire screen, almost like some kind of filter over the top of the graphics. This mesh stays static as the image moves behind it, which makes this effect noticeable, but it's usually only obvious on the PSVR2 when there's some really bold colours in low light environments. Now, unfortunately, the Mura effect with the PSVR2 is here to stay. There's no real way to get rid of it or tune it out like there is with the blur, but I can say that, after having played many hours of PSVR2 now, it's pretty easy for the brain to tune it out, especially seeing as it's really not that obvious in bright, detailed games like Horizon or GT7. I fully suspect that the only reason a lot of people are only really even noticing it right now is down to the fact that people keep on talking about it. Sure, it's not perfect, but it is really easy to live with, and you shouldn't let it put you off trying out the headset, despite what the haters may be saying.
It's jammed. I'll have to climb from here.
Adjusting the audio of the PSVR2 is a bit of a pain, to be honest with you, and it's one of the few things about the headset that seems to be worse than the original PSVR1. With the first headset, there were volume buttons on the cable, which you could use to easily alter the volume of games while you were in VR. These buttons aren't present on the PSVR2's cable though, nor are there any like that on the headset either. So if you're playing VR games using the PSVR2's in-ear headphones, you're going to have to break immersion if you want to lower or raise your game's volume. This can be done by either accessing the in-game menus of the game that you are playing, or by single pressing the PS button on one of your Sense controllers. This will bring up the Control Center menu, which you'd usually bring up to do things like power off the console. Here though, you'll find a speaker icon which you can click on to enter the sound settings menu, where you can then raise and lower the volume to your heart's content. If you play the PSVR2 with external headphones, however, there will likely be volume controls built into those. They're definitely present on Sony's Pulse 3D headset, because that's the one I use, and this means I don't have to access the menus to change the audio levels. But obviously, this may differ depending on the headphone brand that you are using. So many people asked me about the cinematic mode of the PSVR2 before it came out, so I can tell that there is a lot of people out there who are desperate to watch VR movies in their PSVR2 headsets. I'm not sure what type of VR movies those people would be referring to, but I can fappily take a guess at what they may be. Well, unfortunately for those horn dogs, watching standard VR videos in PSVR2 just isn't really possible. At least, not yet anyway. We may see some apps released later down the line that allow users to view standard VR videos through the headset, so don't hang up your toilet roll just yet. But if you're also hoping to watch 3D Blu-rays, you are all out of luck. There is not, and probably never will be, any 3D Blu-ray support for PSVR2, which sucks as I have loads of 3D Blu-rays hanging around. It's not all bad news about the cinematic mode though, as it does allow you to play games and movies that support 120 frames per second even when your TV doesn't, but you will need to activate this feature first. To do that, you need to go to Settings, Accessories, PlayStation VR2, and then Video Output. Here you'll find the option for Cinematic Mode, where you can activate both 120Hz output and HDR2. With this switched on, you can now enjoy games like God of War Ragnarok and Warzone 2.0 in 120 frames per second, just as nature intended. Word of warning though, while you can play flat games in 4K HDR through the PSVR2 headset, you only seem to be able to watch 4K HDR Blu-rays in 1080p, so while you get the watching on a big screen effect with cinema mode, you're still probably better off going to the actual cinema if you want the best image quality on a big screen. Please also be aware that this setting only affects cinematic mode, and therefore has no effect on VR gaming at all. None. Zero. Nada.
See you soon.
Another big question I've seen is whether or not you can have separate user profiles for PSVR2. As everyone has different shaped faces and therefore different IPDs, people have been curious to know how calibration will work between multiple users. Well, just like normal games, if you want to have different settings and saves for VR games, you can set up profiles or guest profiles for each player that wants to use the system, and this should save the settings for each person once they've gone through that initial calibration. This does present a problem if you're planning to pass the headset around in a game with a party mode like Pistol Whip though, as each time you swap profile, you'll need to restart the game, which kind of kills the whole party idea. Instead, the only workaround really is to run calibrations each time a new user puts on the headset. This isn't too important when it comes to something like eye tracking, as you can turn that function off completely in the settings when attempting some quick swap multiplayer, but sorting out the IPD for each person is a must. You can do that in a matter of seconds once everyone is familiar with the headset though. Just get each new user to bring up the PSVR2 quick menu with a double press of the PS button, select Adjust Visibility, twiddle the dial on the visor, and away you all go.
You see that tower out there? Big, scary one?
The PSVR2's eye tracking is going to be a big boost to accessibility in the future, and there's already one game due out for it soon called Before Your Eyes, which can be played via eye tracking only. In terms of other accessibility options, you'll be pleased to know that wearing glasses in the PSVR2 is generally quite comfortable, and I don't think I've seen anyone saying that it's not a good fit for them. In fact, I saw one commenter on a Reddit thread about Mura saying that their glasses removed almost all of that effect altogether, so wearing glasses may even improve things for you, if you're lucky. If you're a wearer of hearing aids, things aren't as good for you though. The in-ear buds included with the PSVR2 will obviously not work in conjunction with a hearing aid, so you'll need to shell out for over-the-ear headphones to get the most out of the audio. I did also reach out to Sony to see if there were any plans to make its upcoming customizable accessibility controller kit Project Leonardo compatible with PSVR2, but I've had no response at the time of making this video. Fingers crossed Project Leonardo does support PSVR2 though, as this will only be a benefit to everyone down the line.
Now, the next time that you blink, I'm gonna send you back.
I've covered the topic of nausea in VR multiple times on this channel, so I'm going to keep this section pretty short. A lot of people who have heard about VR nausea making people sick will go into VR for the very first time expecting to feel ill, which kinda will make you feel ill anyway if you do that. But honestly, it doesn't have to be like this at all. If the PSVR2 is your first time trying VR, just go for gentler seated experience first. The more stationary, the better. Something like Job Simulator is great as there's no movement apart from what you do with your own body, and it lets you get accustomed to operating in a virtual environment. From there, just work your way upwards with more extreme experiences as you go, and make use of the comfort settings in games like vignettes, teleporting and click turning as much as possible. Once you've had a bit of practice, you'll get your VR legs pretty quickly, and soon you'll be zipping around with no comfort settings on, just like me. Just don't make your first time in VR something extreme like Pavlov or Gran Turismo 7, as the intense motion of these games probably will make you feel a bit dizzy, and this is something that may put you off playing VR in the future. Honestly though, it's like riding a motorbike. You wouldn't jump on a motorbike right away with no experience at all. You'd start young with a tricycle, upgrade to a bike with stabilisers, then a standard bike, and then one day you're on a motorbike whizzing down a motorway. VR is like that, but you don't have to wait until you're like 18 years old and do a CBT, which is nice. And finally, do you want to use your new PSVR2 as a PC VR headset so that you can play Half-Life Alyx? Well, you can't. It won't work, so don't bother trying. This may happen in the future after some clever bots have created some hacks and you've got some extra cables for plugging it into ports on your PC or whatever, but for now at least, the PSVR2 and Sense controllers are locked to the PS5. Sorry! And that's your lot, my beauts. Hopefully this video helped you in some way. Do give it a like if it did, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games and Ian's VR Corner episodes every Sunday, and if you want to see more PSVR2 videos from me, there's some on screen and clickable right now. Goodbye!